Update complainers will actually be right for once that this update added ridiculously little. Or will they be? The update isn't finished yet, and today I want to apply an actual analysis to whether Mojang will finish this update with just one major feature and a few minor ones in the form of the Happy Ghast and the lead changes, or whether this will be something much bigger, and that's what I want to explore in today's Q&A Saturday. And so, hello, I'm AbbyXToyCat, and you can subscribe by the way, and I'm going to start this one with the question that everyone in the Minecraft community is asking themselves right now, and that is whether the summer drop is really going to come out with just one major feature, and most people seem to be answering that question with vibes, but I want to use actual data, and so here it is, the table that answers everything, but to actually explain it, I think that looking at how much time there is left for the summer drop can give us a good answer as to how much more we should expect. It's been in development for 2 months, and we know it's releasing in June sometime, but the actual answer to when it will come out is always dependent on Bedrock, because Bedrock has slower processes, and so on the Bedrock version of the game, the 1.2190 update started its preview and beta phase literally on the 22nd of April, and so it's gone through 2 previews and betas so far. Looking at the last 6 updates, you can see that all of them have gone between 5 and 7 previews and betas between the start and the end of their beta phase, I guess we can say, and that means that there are 3 to 5 more previews and betas between now and the end of the summer drop. If we are even more realistic about it, the last one of these is always down to bug fixing, sometimes the last 2, and so that means we have somewhere between 1 and 3 brand new previews and betas that can add new features and actually change things, which is actually pretty bad by itself. But even worse is when we look at those betas and previews, everywhere between 1.21.80 and right now, you can see that 6 of these preview changelogs have come with an image. So if we show you those 6 images now, you can see that 4 of the 6 of those show the Happy Ghast, 3 with vibrant visuals too, to be fair, and then 1 shows a desert super flat, which is actually from a different update, and then 1 shows the locator bar, meaning that 4/5 of what they have shown as far as exciting content in this update is the Happy Ghast so far. And that means we have about 1 and realistically maybe 2 weeks of brand new features that they could add to this summer drop. And are we going to see things? Well, that is the interesting question. But if we assume that it is just one feature, then is it unfair to say that the game is better off with just one big update per year? Not talking about financials, only talking about what's best for gameplay and the community. Weirdly, I think that this is now just objectively true. The amount of content that has come out in a full year of drops is less than the amount of content that came out in a full year of updates, and the only way that you can say that, well, it's actually better in the drop system is either that they're working on the update actively in the background right now. This is a very common theory, at least in my comment section, and more broadly, people assume that if there's been less content, surely it has to be worked on somewhere, or the second argument is that even if there's less content, the way it comes out is much better for, even just outside of marketing purposes, for the average player. I think when the Happy Ghast comes out, by being the only feature in its update, it means I'm going to have to play around with it, and I'm going to have more fun with that one feature than I would if there were, say, 4 other big features just as huge in the same update, and so that means that technically speaking, you can do more with less, although I would entirely argue that the most important thing is how much content goes through the gates of Mojang. I think some people actually much prefer the vibes, and for the vibes people, things are going pretty well right now. Speaking of vibes people, Brewmaster says, nah, June's update will be 1.22, there's no way they will add a 1.20, 1.90, they will just move on to 1.22, which is always a big update. And sadly, you are incorrect on this one. Minecraft have started the beta and preview process for the June update, and they're calling it 1.20, 1.90. It's possible they changed the update name between the betas and the end update, but they've never done that yet, and so it's technically possible in the vibey way. But if we're talking about vibes anyway, I think we should talk about what Mojang really needs to do, because Zizix makes a really good point, which is that we're still waiting for the trial chamber rooms to get re-added to Bedrock. If you don't know, the encounter rooms were actually first added to Bedrock before 1.21 ever came out, but just before the release of the update, they went, ooh, actually there's some stability concerns, and so they removed them from all worlds. You can only have one of these encounter rooms if you played in the beta and previews of the time, and obviously they had some issues at that point, but still, it's kind of wild if you ask me that there is a feature which fully existed in Minecraft Bedrock, which they removed, even though they kept it in the Java version, and which a year later they haven't re-added. I think an even sillier example would be that of the redstone torch. It's the exact same situation. They added this to Java and just forgot to add it to Bedrock. I think that's absolutely nuts. That sounds made up and fake, but it very much is true. Here is the redstone torch looking like this, despite looking different on Java. Will this kind of craziness continue? If they keep on going for drops, maybe it will. There just isn't time to update this stuff. Also, look, you can see it's an ultra chamber just from this. But yeah, very, very funky time gotta say. But speaking of funky time, by the way... Oh, this is a weird trial chamber, huh? Speaking of not having time to update this stuff, here's an interesting comment from LB_, who says, wait a minute, you're telling me that Microsoft, a company doing a massive accessibility push over recent years, prefers Bedrock Edition but only has subtitles/captions in the Java edition. Yes, this is actually true. They added the subtitles to Java in 2015, so technically just after Microsoft took over, although I imagine it was in the works for years at that point, and they haven't added it to Bedrock at this point, despite the fact that it is the far more played version with the far higher need for accessibility, if you ask me. They just haven't had time to add it to the engine, apparently, very confusingly. I think that this is one of the most important things that we should be pushing. Parity has led to so many downsides over the years, and so what is the point of having all those downsides if we can't have the upsides of actually functioning accessibility features on the Bedrock edition of the game? And the answer is, ooh, I guess we haven't come up with the answer to that one yet. By the way, speaking of haven't come up with the answer to that one, Privwater Yan9731 says this guy titled Superflat Survival Live and then decided to scrap it at the last minute. If you don't know what this is in reference to, I stream here on YouTube about 3 times per week, but on YouTube, unlike most platforms, you have to say what you're going to stream and when you're going to stream it ahead of time. You have to make thumbnails as well, and so usually I just put up the best idea for what I think I'm going to do, but on the day it can be like, you know what, it sounds really fun to do this, but it might be way more fun to do that, which is why we've done a bunch of Oblivion streams this week, and why maybe I jump in and decide to play some survival and chill. I think that that is why you might see a title for a stream change at the last minute, and it's just one of the flaws in the YouTube system that you might click on a video while it looks one way, and then it might change to look like something else, and my apologies if that ever throws you off. But speaking of being thrown off by the looks of something, Wario Dude 128 says, well, if there's an update that's going to change how inventories for everything that has one look, then maybe they'll add functionality for the fletching table too as a nice bonus. Hey, I can dream, can't I? And you know what, I absolutely love this. I think that sometimes you can be delusional in a way where you genuinely don't want to believe it. Like Zemiifian here says that they wish they give us an idea of what the end update will be, maybe show off what they've done on it so far. We need more to do in game, and I want to just say that, you know what, dreaming about the fletching table makes sense. They've specifically said they'll do it. However, being very sure that Mojang are working on an end update and actually have a prototype available is very unlikely. We see these snapshots and betas, and although there are some things in internal development versions, I think it's very unlikely there's a whole end update that they're working on and we just can't see, and I think that if you set your expectations there, you can only ever be disappointed. And so Zemifian, I hope this is a useful reminder that if you keep your expectations tiny, you can almost never be whiny. Speaking of not being whiny, I do like flipping this idea on its head from Hizzle333, who says if a huge graphical overhaul like the vibrant visuals doesn't warrant a 1.22 stamp on the game, I'm incredibly curious as to what they will do for a 1.22 update. And indeed, that's kind of my thinking right here. Sure, I can 100% see how now, knowing what we know about the summer drop, it surely isn't worth the 1.22 tag. If it is one major feature and then some side features, then probably not. And if they are saying that Vibrant Visuals is going to come out, which so far we have no indication that it isn't, we just don't have an indication that it is, but if it isn't going to warrant 1.22 with brand new visuals in the summer drop, then what are they going to do for a 1.22 update? And I kind of like the idea of, answering this internally. Like, think to yourself, what do you think would be big enough to justify 1.22? There isn't an end/fletching table update, but instead I actually would rather take the statistical analysis again and go into Anna Bell Holland's question here, because they say the longest time between major updates since 1.8, 1.9, because as they can recall, there were no updates in 2015, at least not major ones, and you're correct, Annabelle Holland. This is one of the craziest times in Minecraft history. Because of the Microsoft acquisition, they went 545 days without an update. That is the exact number of days between the release date of 1.8 in 2014 and the release date of 1.9 in 2016, and you know what they got in exchange for that year-and-a-half gap between updates? One of the most significant updates to ever release, the combat update. 1.9 didn't just change combat as a whole in such a hugely significant way that it still hasn't come to Bedrock, but it's also the time where they decided to update the end and potions and quite a few other mechanics. And so I'm just saying, if we waited 545 days from June the 13th, 2024, which is when we last got a major version, that would take us to Wednesday the 10th of December, 2025. And so if you believe in history repeating itself, then we could get a hugely significant combat update, perhaps a combat update V2 if you will, and maybe we could get some slight end overhauls in there at the same time. Would that be worthy of the 1.22 stamp? I think it certainly would, and so maybe we should mark our calendars for December. But more seriously, I do think we actually might be headed, again, assuming that the autumn drop and the winter drop both are not 1.22, and so far we have no indication that either will be, then this might be the longest time between major updates, which isn't quite fair because we're getting much bigger drops than we ever did between 1.8 and 1.9, but it's still something hugely interesting to think about. Speaking of hugely interesting to think about, I want to go into Stag 2's comment here because they say they would love to see more videos on Reforge. Its development is insanely impressive considering they're already allowing playtesting. 4J's doing an excellent job, and I think Reforge as a whole needs more eyes on it. It seems like mostly only the Brits are aware of it at the moment, and I do think that not just British people are playing Reforge right now. It just opened up to its Pioneer program, so there's something like 500 playtesters around the world actually playing around with it. Maybe you are lucky enough to be one of them, and from what I can tell from everyone who follows me who is in the program, it's actually going pretty well. I think people are very excited for what they're seeing, and I am really excited to see them actually flesh out the game and to be able to download and play around with those updates as they go live. Will the game be successful is still that big question in everyone's mind, but I think the way more important question is, will the game be fun? And so far, the core gameplay mechanics, you know, the building and the terrain are looking incredible, so I think it would be hard for them not to deliver on that. But we'll have to wait and see how that actually turns out, I guess. Speaking of waiting to seeing how things turn out, we got this comment from Brian Shaber on my Why Can't We Craft This video, which is the existence of evil disproves God. If God is good, then everything happens according to God's will, and evil shouldn't be able to exist. The fact that evil exists proves God either doesn't control everything, or isn't good at all, and or doesn't exist at all. And you know what, actually, I was gonna just ignore this one, because, you know, who is commenting on this on a You Can't Craft This video? But actually, you know, I think it's useful to know that the existence of evil is one of the reasons why many people have religion as a thing close to their heart. They need to explain why it exists, and having a divine reason for evil to be there is actually something a lot of people vibe with. On a non-religious level, I think a lot of people like the idea that when something bad happens to you, it's not just senseless, you know, pain and senseless, you know, anguish that's happening in your brain, but actually there is a reason for that, and maybe the best reason for it is that, well, you know it's happened, so it will never happen again. But for every terrible thing that's happened, there is some upside, you could argue, and I think people are much happier with that being the case than the exact opposite. And so in that way, I would like to say that, you know what, maybe the last few years of the one update a year system that led to people at the end being entirely unenthused for the updates, maybe that bad period and that negative period of Minecraft development is actually required to get into the positive period we have now. Maybe everything bad that happens has the benefit of helping the good things in the future be better. This is one of the philosophies I live my life by, and I managed to tie this unrelated comment into this update news video, and so I think to kind of tie this whole thing up, I'll answer the titular question one last time, which is this actually going to be a one feature update? Is there just going to be a happy ghast in it? It certainly looks like there is going to be, and it means that our expectations of what a drop can be have been substantially lowered. We've gone from thinking that the Spring to Life update was actually pretty decent, but a small drop, into, oh, this is actually one of the big ones, and the summer drop is now a small one. And so is every year going to have one drop where they, you know, semi-phone it in, if we're being honest? Is every year going to have multiple drops that way? Or is it only that this update is so small because they're secretly working on 1.22, you know, the December update with the combat and the end? Well, that's an interesting one for you to think about. I do think that you could argue that this is an end update. If you're that sort of person that wants to go conspiracy brain, I've seen a surprising number of my subscribers mention that actually the happy ghast would work well in the end if you wanted it to, and so that's something that sounds like a lot of fun to play around with. But more seriously, I do think that we do have a couple more weeks. I'm going to remain optimistic till then, but I would also say, being realistic, it doesn't look like we're getting that much more, but we are getting a brand new Bedrock update literally next Tuesday, and we are getting a couple new betas and previews that will actually have new features and changes, and I'm excited to see exactly what's inside those, because otherwise, I hope you've all enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, because I have been IBX Toycat, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.